Good morning, y'all. We are back with an emergency edition of DNVR Rams Live. Big news. Colorado State Pac-12 bound. I had a completely different show planned for today. I actually fell asleep pretty early last night, so I missed all the chaos. I woke up to all of this, had just so many missed texts. I had put my phone on Do Not Disturb because I was over some of the silliness on Twitter between, the politics and CSUCU and everything. And admittedly, I stirred the pot a little bit by sharing that Dion clip yesterday. So I'm not without blame. I'm not trying to be a martyr here. But just a bombshell report to wake up to that Colorado State is officially, it has been confirmed by the school. This is not just rumor mill. Pac-12 bound in 2026. CSU, along with Boise State, San Diego State, and Fresno State will be joining Oregon State and Washington State in the current Pac-2. Obviously, still have the Pac-12 brand. It's not shocking that this is where we're at. If you've listened to me for a long time, everything that I've heard for the last couple of years was that the Pac-12 schools had every intent of rebuilding, and obviously schools like CSU, San Diego State, Boise, they were keeping their eye on it. These are the current Pac-12 teams. By the way, this emergency pod is brought to you by Indeed. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/AllCity. That's Indeed.com/AllCity. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. I'm really excited about this move. I understand that there's some elements of it that are bittersweet. I understand that this is not the same Pac-12 brand that it once was. I do think that this is a really bold move, and we're going to get into everything. I'm going to address as many of your questions and comments as I can as well. We've got Alyssa, superstar producer behind the scenes. She'll flag anything that's worth getting to. Here's what we know so far. The Rams, along with the other Mountain West schools, will be joining as full members on July 1st, 2026. There are going to be exit fees, and I will say what is reported, and this is based on what was agreed to with the Mountain West media rights deal, as well as the scheduling agreement between Oregon State and Washington State with the Mountain West. There are additional penalties. So this is going to be a costly move for these Mountain West schools to leave. Roughly $17 million in exit fees based on the timeline, plus an additional $11 million or so per school based on that scheduling agreement. I will say Oregon State and Washington State, they're going to have a lot of money coming in thanks to the media rights shares that they're going to get. All of the NCAA tournament shares, all of the college football playoff money, all that stuff that the Pac-12's made in recent years, that's all going to Oregon State and Washington State. So I assume, they help these schools pick up part of the bill in that regard. It's a really exciting opportunity to join one of the historically significant brands in college football. I mean, the Pac-12, it means something. And I do understand that, without USC, without UCLA, without a lot of these schools that we have known for years, it's not quite the same, but you have an opportunity to go in on the ground level. As my good buddy Aaron Harris says here in the Toyota chat, also reported that the new schools in the Pac-12 in the Pac-12 will also get full voting rights immediately. So we get to help shape the future of the conference. We're not going in, as like half members, like you see some of this current stuff, like SMU going into the ACC, not getting any money or power or anything like that. We are going to have an ability to help shape the future of this conference. And there's a lot of exciting possibility here. There's a lot of different ways that this can go. We'll get into, who the other schools could be that the Pac-12 could target. They obviously have to get to 8 members to have FBS status for 2026. Still time there. I will say, even if it isn't the Pac-12 of old brand and being associated, and these are good schools to be associated with. Boise State academically, not the best, but obviously their football brand really means something. You would want them in a league where basically the future is dictated by football, but it's an opportunity to lock down a better media rights deal. First of all, so many people, when they were proposing a hypothetical Pac-12 or, adding a teams to the Mountain West, there were so many pitches where it was like 16, 18 teams. Ironically, that's what broke up the WAC and led to the formation of the Mountain West. It's just too many mouths to feed. And by going into this league and having it lean, you don't have to split the pie with as many people. I would have to believe that streaming could be on the table here, whether that's Apple or Amazon or Peacock. We're seeing all these different companies get involved in professional sports. I'd keep an eye on all of those. I would keep an eye on TNT as well. Turner Sports, they're losing the NBA. They're making a commitment into college athletics. They've already invested in Big East basketball. Maybe they want that West Coast footprint as well. I mean, there's so many things that could happen here. I mean, even ESPN could decide that they want back in on that late window. It's not going to be the same money. It's not going to be the same prestige as the SEC, as the Big Ten. I understand all that, but it's a step up from where you're currently at. And it's an opportunity to be in a better position moving forward. And I don't remember who said it. I've seen a couple of people with this opinion, but basically, if you're sitting here and being skeptical, like, is this really a move up from the current Mountain West? I wouldn't say it's leaps and bounds. I mean, it definitely establishes you as the premier, league outside of those Power Four right now. But moving forward, you have an opportunity, to add and to build on to that. And frankly, like schools like San Diego State, Boise State, they've been itching to get out for a while. And how would you feel if you were one of the schools that didn't get called? If you're UNLV right now, and I do wonder if they still end up factoring into the mix later down the line. But the point is you couldn't sit idle here. You got to evolve or you die in this ever-changing landscape. I'm going to read a quote here. This is from Amy Parsons. "We are taking control of our future at CSU by forming an alliance of 6 peer institutions who will serve as the foundation of a new era of the Pac-12. This move elevates CSU in a way which will benefit our students, bolster our core mission, and strengthens our reputation for academic and research excellence. CSU is honored to be among the universities asked to help carry on this historic tradition of the Pac-12 as a highly competitive conference with some of the nation's leading research institutions." That last line still matters. I know that athletics are the driving force. Football success is a big part in this. When you see snarky comments from like people on the Boise State side being like, I don't understand, the interest in CSU. Why would you take them? It's about more than just having a good football program. Obviously, that would have helped. CSU could have gotten up and out a lot quicker had they had success on the football side. But it's about Fort Collins. It's about what CSU brings to the table as an entire university. It's about the entire athletic footprint. If it was only about football success, Boise State would have gotten out, 15, 20 years ago. And at the end of the day, whether this is a massive step up or just, a minor, it's still a step in the right direction. And it's an opportunity to remain relevant in this landscape, which is just constantly in a state of flux. And if you're willing to be content and have this is good enough mentality, that's how you get left behind. You have to take chances. And I really do think there's an opportunity here to create a highly competitive, really fun, potentially regionally based for once conference, which I'm really, really excited about. Another thing I do want to hit on, because this was obviously one of the first things that came to mind for me when this news dropped, was, what does this mean for the border war? CSU and Wyoming have been together for, I think, 100+ years at this point. And I don't think there's been any gaps since like before 1920 in terms of them being in the same league. It's my favorite rivalry in all sports. I know there's a lot of love for the Rocky Mountain Showdown. I love the Rocky Mountain Showdown. Do not get me wrong. I'm so pumped for this weekend. There's just something about the border war that's uniquely special. And not being in the same conference, that opens up the possibility of this game not being yearly anymore. We see that happen pretty frequently with rivalries. It's unfortunately probably the biggest casualty of all this realignment stuff. I think CSU and Wyoming need to play every year, no matter what. Now, in the statement that was released by the athletic department, which I just quoted from Amy Parsons, John Weber also commented, and he mentioned that keeping CSU's traditional rivalries will be a priority through non-conference scheduling. the question to me is, will both be willing to dance? Like, if you're Wyoming, could you get petty here and just choose to not play the Rams, hold them ransom or something like that, make them pay a big fee potentially? I would think that a game this important, especially from an attendance standpoint, would be an emphasis for them to keep alive. But at the end of the day, you have to look out for what's best for CSU, because that's what everybody else across the country is doing. It's what they've done. It's a little unfortunate that, we're going to lose some of these long-time relationships. It's not just Wyoming, for the record. Some of the schools that go back to the original WAC, like New Mexico, that's a deep-rooted relationship. Those are long ties that we've had. Even that will make me sad to not have, to an extent. I'll be honest, not being in the same league as Air Force, that doesn't hurt my feelings at all. Just being honest, it's never really, like, yes, it's a rival, it's a game you want to win, it's a trophy game. And I do think there's some malice on the playing field because of Air Force's style. It's really annoying to go against. So when you talk to players, like, they truly do despise going up against Air Force. But Air Force's biggest rivals are Army and Navy. Those are the games that matter more than anything. We've got a couple of Air Force fans that are active members in our DNVR Discord. One of the perks of being a DNVR member, really fun. We've got fans from all over college sports in there. But, they could care less about the 10-win seasons in the Mountain West. They could care less about bullying CSU or beating up on CU in the couple times that they played. Yeah, that's a little perk. But frankly, like, what they care about are those commander-in-chief games. Now, I enjoy playing them, and obviously, I mean, they have owned CSU. Like, they've owned the Rams. But if you're CSU, you prioritize CU and Wyoming more. If you're Air Force, you prioritize Army and Navy more. All I'm saying is, if that's a game that isn't yearly anymore, I don't think it's a situation where both sides are devastated the way that I think both sides would be if you lose the border war, which is ultimately a much more historically relevant rivalry, so much more deep-rooted history between the two schools. To me, that needs to be one of the biggest priorities. And some of that will come down to whether Wyoming is willing to play ball. But we'll see. I mean, there's a lot to still be found out, even from, whether they can negotiate fees, like who the schools are going to be. As Eric Hansen says here in the Toyota chat, it seemed like Stanford and Cal didn't want to leave. They just wanted to survive. So if they can get the money figured out, I bet they can come back. Some of that will probably be dependent on what the TV companies want. That's basically who drive all this. If they decide that's better for the ACC and it's better for this West Coast League, especially if they happen to have, the media rights to both, then it could definitely happen down the line. But you had to get on this life raft, because I think if you stand pat with the direction that college sports are heading, San Diego State, Boise State, they would have gotten out eventually. And now instead, you're part of the party. So I think it's really exciting. Again, I understand it's not the Pac-12 that it once was, and it's not going to have the same cachet, but that brand still holds, some weight. And I just think that this is exciting. You gotta take the wins when they come. We're going to keep talking about all this. I appreciate everybody in the Toyota chat. You guys are awesome. I want to talk to you guys about Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the 2024 Tacoma. Those things are sweet. The Land Cruiser is back, also sweet. Toyota offers 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low-end, zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. That's beyond done, though. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota, a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. I also want to talk to you guys about a statewide initiative from our friends over at UC Health. UC Health's Ready Set Co challenge is a statewide challenge, and it's emphasizing nutrition. And one of the One of the big pillars this year is mindfulness. I think one of the big misconceptions when it comes to general health, mental health, all of the above, is that it's all or nothing. And the thing is, it's about little decisions each and every day, getting you in the right direction. Maybe you have a healthier side one day. Maybe, when you're stressed out, you have the mindfulness to go outside, to take some deep breaths. I'll be honest, man. I was really overwhelmed this morning when I was preparing for this show. I had a completely different show plan. I was supposed to go down to Denver, do the show with Dre, found out this was happening. And, I was kind of freaking out. I was starting to have like a panic attack. Had to go outside, get in the grass a little bit, did a couple push-ups. That always helps. If you want to join UC Health's Ready, Set, CO Challenge, or Co Challenge, sorry, click the link in the show notes or go to www.uchealth.org/ready-set-co. All right. What's next? That's what we're going to get into. What's next for the Pac-12? What happens to the Mountain West? Those are two big questions. They got to get to 8 teams at least by 2026. I am interested to see, do they go only 2 teams and have it really be lean and trim and stay at 8, especially keeping the possibility open of like a Stanford and Cal coming back down the line, or Arizona and Arizona State. That could be in the mix down the line, depending on what happens with all these leagues. I mean, sometimes you jump ship and the grass isn't always greener. I could definitely see a situation where some of these schools that maybe moved out of necessity, just trying to stay alive, would embrace an opportunity to come back to the West Coast, especially if you're like a Stanford and Cal, who historically has really cared about their Olympic sports. And now you're really putting them in a brutal spot. I mean, you don't get chartered planes if you're on the swim team the way that you do on the football team. I mean, you don't get, those deals if you're playing softball or track. And, when you look at the Olympic results this last summer, Cal and Stanford had more than anybody. So I do think they are 2 schools that you should keep an eye on. And I don't foresee them being added into this initial mix. Good Lord. In 2026. But I do think that, especially down the line, and if this league were to build up some momentum, they would make a whole lot of sense. Personally, I think the 2 most likely schools at this point would, and this is just my gut, would probably be Memphis and UTSA. I will say I think South Florida makes a lot of sense, just because, again, it's not just about, having a successful TV program. Oh my God, I can't talk today. It's not about just having a successful football program. It's about TV market. It's about what you bring to the table as an institution. South Florida is a really good school. I could see them being in the mix, but I could also see this Pac-12 wanting to have some common sense and essentially looking at the situation and trying to keep it more regional based. And if that were the case, I do think you could prioritize UTSA, maybe Rice. Again, they're a great school. Rice doesn't do a ton for me. I'd rather go into San Antonio. I do think that program has a little bit more juice, but Rice is, one of the better schools in the country. And if the goal is to lure Stanford and Cal back into the mix, having those type of schools really makes sense. And again, like, your perception as a school beyond football does factor a lot into this equation, because it's university presidents that are making this decision. And it was interesting to see just how few people actually knew this was happening. I mean, this didn't come out until last night, which was intentional. I don't think coaches knew. I mean, I really think it was a situation where like presidents, ADs, and probably some legal counsel were able to know. And outside of that, it was kept very tight. I don't think any of the local beats were first on this, which was interesting. I mean, this was something that they had in the works, and I'm curious, like, how many schools from the Mountain West wanted to be in this mix. UNLV is the first one that jumps to mind. I would say that with the success they've had in football and the trajectory of Vegas as a market, UNLV makes a lot of sense. I also wonder if there's some politics involved behind the scene. I do, from what I've read, it sounds like the state legislator has some stuff in place that kind of deeply keeps them connected to Nevada, Reno. There's some similar situations with Arizona and Arizona State. I don't think Arizona State wanted to leave the Pac-12. I think they wanted to stay, but basically local politicians wanted them to stay together. They had to. They end up going to the Big 12. Sometimes there's politics that get involved or kind of get in the way of these things. And again, that doesn't mean that UNLV is 100% out of the mix. That also could just mean that it's going to take a little bit. And if that's the case, like maybe you just go get UNLV and UTSA and call it a day. I mean, I know that Tulane is a really competitive football program. New Orleans, a great city. I don't know how much support goes around Tulane football. Could be, speaking completely ignorantly here. I'm again, this has all happened pretty fast. It's not like I've had the opportunity to kind of dive into everybody's, attendance or anything like that. I know that they're highly competitive and they've been really good these last couple years. But again, I just think that the equation is a little bit more complicated than that. And it's why a school like CSU is frankly in the mix, despite not having been to a bowl game since 2017, since not having won a bowl game since 2013. It's a whole complicated ordeal. This did happen faster than I expected. I will say that. I figured it'd probably be more around next summer where a lot of these moves would happen. I did always anticipate that the Pac-12 was going to rebuild. I wasn't sure if CSU was going to be in the mix, but I know that they certainly wanted to be. I'm looking forward later today, by the way, I'm going to have an opportunity to catch up with John Weber and Amy Parsons over the phone. I will get some content out on what they are able to let me know on this situation as well. Really appreciate CSU for the great access. They're constantly working with me to make things happen for the show, to give me opportunities to get interviews and practice and for columns and features. And I've got plenty of that coming out as well. Obviously, huge game on Saturday. Today was supposed to be a CU preview show. We had to pivot, so we'll get that in either later today or I can do it tomorrow. I guess I also have the interview with Jake Bennett that I need to get out to you guys. So we've got lots of content coming up. You guys are going to be really busy as Ram fans. I'm sure you're excited though. I am interested who do you guys want? Like in the Toyota chat, give me your top two options, because I think the two that make the most sense, assuming that UNLV is not going to be one of them, is UTSA and Memphis. Those would be my two choices. Memphis, from a basketball standpoint, really, really solid. And on top of that, maybe that opens up a window where you could bring in like Gonzaga and St. Mary's as basketball only members. There are a lot of different options with which you could go. You could take all four teams from the AAC and get to 10, and then you'd really handicap the Mountain West and the AAC. What happens to the Mountain West is really interesting to me too. Like, I hope it's clear, if you're listening to the show as a fan of any of these other Mountain West institutions, most likely Wyoming based on who I interact with the most, but any of these other schools, I hope this is not coming off as me trying to tap dance on the Mountain West grave or anything, because I've really loved the Mountain West, and it is bittersweet to me because I've grown up watching this my entire life, and I think if the Mountain West could have held on, to some of the schools they used to have, like Utah and TCU and some of the BYU, I think it would be a power conference. But this is just where college athletics have headed, and it's where we're at. And I understand that there are some really frustrating elements of that. I don't love a lot of it, but I do think this is a move that was very much necessary for CSU. Dan says in the Toyota chat, Hawaii. I don't think Hawaii is even a little bit on the table. They're a travel nightmare logistically. They'd be football only members. The only way Hawaii makes sense is that if you happen to also get Gonzaga as a basketball member and you need it just to have even numbers on both sides. But Hawaii is fun. I love them. I don't think they'll get prioritized. Out of the Mountain West schools, I really think the only ones that would factor into this group is UNLV. Maybe you could talk me into New Mexico. They have a lot of support on the Olympic sports side. Basketball to Pitt is awesome. Aaron says UTSA and UConn. UConn would be really interesting. If you could lure UConn, then you probably definitely could lure Gonzaga. And at that point, you've got one of the better basketball leagues in the country. I don't know if UConn would be willing to do that. I don't know if that would be a big enough step up for them on their estimation. Although it does seem like they are interested in having their football program be much more relevant than it currently is. Joe in the Toyota chat says the Mountain West also needs to add Texas schools. Texas footprint is important. I also think that the most desirable Texas schools at this point are largely claimed. Now, you are banking on some of these schools having a rising profile, and I do get that. And the access to those markets would be big from a recruiting standpoint. It's big from a TV standpoint, support all of that. Max says Memphis and SMU would be his top choices. If you're SMU, maybe just because they're not making any money at the moment, just the opportunity to bring them over as full members, give them a full revenue share would be enough. But again, I don't know how that would work with some of these schools that just got locked into new conferences. I think it's more likely that those type of schools could be in the mix, like let's say this happens, you start the Pac-12 in 2026 with these 6 teams plus at least 2 other teams. Then another media rights deal opens up. You see some more movement in like 2030 or something like that. And that's just a hypothetical year. I could see that being like when some of these other schools come back into play. The justification, as Aaron says in the Toyota chat, for UConn would be that it's a trip east. You could say the same thing for South Florida or Tulane. Obviously, New Orleans is an exciting travel destination. Maybe that's a selling point. I don't know. They increase travel costs so much across the board, and they aren't so desirable as programs that I think people are jumping at the opportunity to go there. I think staying lean and mean will be the best plan going forward. Rick says they shouldn't go nuts with being spread out. They should stay as co-located as possible. As somebody who's a traditional college fan, that's what I aim for. I also know that, again, these decisions, especially because they're driven by the TV stations and streamers at this point, obviously are a big factor. The media providers, I guess, is what I should phrase it as. They could decide that they want an East Coast and a West Coast footprint because that gives you more TV windows to fill. And ultimately, that's what all of this is about. And that's what is exciting, I think, if you are these schools, is that you have an opportunity to be the Premier League in that West Coast time slot in those late night games. Now, it might not be great for some of the fans. We might have a lot of late night games that, the schedule this year, a lot of 5:30 games, 5 afternoon even. That's pretty choice when it comes to actually going to the games. Could be a lot of 8 and 8:30 starts. I'm just being real with you. There are potentially some downsides to this. But if you're getting a heck of a lot more money, if you're getting to play on channels like ESPN instead of CBS Sports Network, I think that's a huge win. And I think that the ceiling moving forward is a lot higher in the long run. And that's just kind of where I'm at. Somebody jokes they should add Georgia in the Toyota chat. Sure. Lamar says they should add UNLV and Nevada. UNLV makes a lot of sense. Nevada doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, they invest a ton of money in basketball, and that's about it. And I think that's probably the biggest argument against Nevada and against New Mexico. Although both of those programs do look frisky this year. I'm not trying to bag on them. I'm just trying to be realistic about what happens. Aaron says in the Toyota chat, I could see New Mexico, UNLV, and Air Force jumping to the AAC. I do think the Mountain West getting poached is certainly in play now that, the top 4 schools leave. And I think likewise, had CSU not been in the mix, them and Air Force going to the American, which is a move they highly considered a couple of years ago, that definitely could have happened. It could happen down the line. I think UNLV being in the mix in the Pac-12 at some point is still pretty likely. I have a hard time seeing Vegas get left behind in all this with all the growth we're seeing in Vegas as a sports market. You can have, bowl games there. And I guess you don't have to technically have a Vegas school to do all that. But it's potential. I don't know. Air Force's big TV money reasons. UConn is absolutely not doing this. Yeah, I don't think UConn is doing it. I'm just responding to what people are commenting, and people are throwing out what they would love to see. This is all fun. Again, I think the most realistic scenario is you go and you add UTSA and probably Memphis. Those would probably be the most likely scenarios. Memphis has got great backing from FedEx. They've got a big stadium, football and basketball, which is important. I think they're the biggest choice out of these G4 teams that you would target. And UTSA is a growing program. You get access to San Antonio. It's a football program on the rise, but really access to Texas and not drastically increasing your travel costs. And I guess, I mean, it would sort of work as a travel partner for Memphis. I know Tennessee, Texas, that's not a perfect pairing, and maybe that's why you ultimately go like UTSA and Tulane or Memphis and Tulane. Maybe that's a little bit more direct. Maybe I'm way off in my geography. I'm doing these on the top of my head, so just bear with me here. But this is crazy. It's exciting. I'm really interested to kind of see where it all goes moving forward. But again, I'm rooting for the Mountain West to stay stable, to keep the at least 7 teams if UNLV does end up leaving, but 7 or 8 teams that they still have. And I hope they go and add like Montana and Montana State or North Dakota State or something like that. One of these FCS programs that I think would very much fit the competitive profile, would still have some regionality, and would be pretty natural members. I'm not rooting for schools like New Mexico and Wyoming to just fall into oblivion. I don't think you should either. First of all, that's bad karma. I think it's a douchey approach. But second of all, like we have a lot of history with all these schools, a lot of relationships that are deep rooted. We all probably have friends that are associated with these. Maybe you don't have a ton of friends like that are up in Laramie, but I've got good friends that cover the team. I've got friends all over the league, and it's a little bit disheartening that this could be a really negative reality for some of these schools. But at the same time, if you're the Mountain West, you're about to get close to 100 million in exit fees and everything else. Like, I don't think they're a league that's in desperation, even having lost these 4 teams. The most interesting thing to me in terms of what could happen to the future of the Mountain West is, how does Gloria Nevarez play into all this? Because I think she is a killer commissioner, and that's who I would want to run this Pac-12. I'd imagine that that's already been floated by some of these schools. We'll see. But I think that's like the most interesting thing to come out of all this, is what ends up happening with Gloria Nevarez. All right, I'm going to get to some of your questions and comments here before we get out of here. I do want to talk to you guys about Coors Light, who encourages choosing a chill mindset. As I told you, I got pretty worked up this morning. I deal with anxiety like many of you. Got to do little things each and every day, deep breaths, trying to get exercise, spend some time in the sun. I definitely know being a dweller in my office probably does not help the cause. That's what Coors Light encourages you to do, is do the little things that help you stay in a chill state of mind. Maybe you just got to go mow the lawn. Maybe you got to go for a little walk around the neighborhood. Maybe you got to call up a friend and see how they're doing. I mean, there's nothing like talking to a loved one, making sure they're doing okay. Once you put yourself in that chill state of mind, then it's cool to kick back, crack open a nice cold Coors Light, enjoy the refreshment of the Rockies when the mountains turn blue. It's as cold as the Rockies, cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for that smooth finish. Coors Light is mountain cold refreshment, crisp and refreshing as the Colorado Rockies. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. I also want to talk to you about Game Time. Game Time has made it easier than ever to get great deals to basically anything. They have got sports, they have got comedy, theater, musical theater, you name it, they've got it. And Game Time's making it easier than ever with their Game Time picks to get tickets for your Game Time live events. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I love Game Time because no matter what, they've got something for you. They've got zone deals, they've got flash deals, they have a super deal, where they come in right before the game and they give you a even better deal. They're just constantly making it more convenient and cheaper for you to attend all of your favorite events. Again, Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, comedy, theater, etc. I love that the all-in pricing is there. You're not getting hit with a bunch of fees. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. I appreciate everybody in the Toyota chat. Even those of you that don't understand this is not a CU company. We cover all of Denver sports here, all of Colorado sports, actually. And today is all about CSU. So head on over to your show when it comes. All right, we have got some starred questions and comments here. Let's start with Eric. Thoughts on Colorado State going to the Pac-12? I think that will save the Pac-12. I don't think this is necessarily like jumping to the SEC or the Big Ten or anything like that. I'm not saying it's this massively changing moment like in the short term, but the ceiling in the long term is just so much higher. I think from an academic standpoint, this is important. You are associating with some of the better schools, aside from Boise State, but obviously what they bring to the table from a football standpoint is huge, really competitive in other sports as well. This is a big move, and the Pac-12 needed to go out and basically add the best of the rest. It's not going to be the Pac-12 that it once was without USC, without UCLA, Washington, Oregon. I mean, those were the flagship brands, and they're no longer in the picture. That said, you have an opportunity here to clearly cement yourself as the best league outside of those other four. And frankly, I don't think the movement is done there either. Like the ACC could implode, which then what happens? Do Cal and Stanford come back? Who knows what'll happen with the Big 12, the Big 10? I mean, there always could be an opportunity to add even more schools. It's never done moving. And as much as we act, and I mean, it's definitely been much more dramatic of late, but as much as we act like college realignment is just now a thing, it just isn't. I mean, we think about the Southwestern Athletic Conference and the way it went out. That was a historically relevant conference. You look at what the Big 12 is today versus the original Big 8. How many members of the Big 8 are even in the current iteration of the Big 12? It's been something that has always been evolving and changing. And if you aren't willing to evolve with it, that's how you get left behind. I applaud these guys for being bold. I think it would have been really easy to just look at the situation and say, well, we're not going to do this because it's not as big of a move as it once was, but it's still a move. It's still a move up the ladder. And that's what you have to do little by little. The more you have success, the more you as an institution are relevant, the more your league is relevant, the more these schools compete. But frankly, the bottom, the floor of this league is a lot higher than when you're associating with some of these other programs like San Jose State and, New Mexico and Nevada and just some of these programs. And I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm not trying to take shots, but it's just the reality that we are in. Do you see this as an opportunity for NDSU to make a jump to maybe the Mountain West? Nick wants to know. I do. I do think it's an opportunity for multiple FCS programs. They increased the fee that it costs to jump from the FCS to the FBS, which is potentially a factor. And honestly, it was kind of lame. Like, I don't think that many FCS schools are trying to make the jump. Like, I get that they're trying to discourage and end up diluting the product by having schools that are not nearly ready to make that jump. But yeah, I think if you are the Mountain West, you absolutely kick the tires there. I mean, outside of being able to poach, a couple of those top AAC schools, like, I don't know, maybe you try and bring over Army and Navy and just be the military institution conference. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen, but North Dakota State is certainly capable of competing in the FBS. I think that they should be on the table, whether it's the AAC, the Mountain West, whoever. And I mean, even if you're the Pac-12 here, do you kick the tires on like a Montana or Montana State? I don't think so. I don't think they're quite as intriguing as some of these other ones. But I could see it. I mean, it's a growing state. They've got a ton of tech money. They certainly have great fan support. Maybe. I mean, we'll see there. I'm not really sure where they rank institutionally or like what they bring to the table there. I'd have to do some research on some of that kind of stuff. Foco Rams wants to say, Justin, can you explain why Fresno is targeted as a core brand from the Mountain West? Obviously, have a great football program, but I'm not seeing a whole lot else. Thanks. Great community support. I think Fresno has as much consistent local support as any football program at the D1 level in California. And I mean that genuinely. Like USC, when they're huge, don't get me wrong, they're a big draw. That's obviously a massive brand. When they're bad, nobody cares. There's too much other things to do in Los Angeles. There's pro sports, there's Hollywood, there's a lot going on. And UCLA, Cal, like Stanford, we see the empty stadiums. I mean, I understand that Fresno does not bring a lot to the table with some of the other sports, and I do think that this is a chance to, like, in particularly, like elevate the basketball program, but they do have good baseball. That's another thing to factor in. CSU doesn't have baseball, but all the schools in the Pac-12 did, I think, except for CU. So I assume that, these other schools do. I think Boise has baseball. I know they tried at it, and then there were some wrinkles there. But Fresno, they've got a ton of community support. It gives you another base in California. Now you've got Central California. You've also got, San Diego and Southern California. If you're going to be the Pac-12, you have to have a pretty significant California presence. And I think by adding Fresno and San Diego State, you had the best remaining programs that were on the table, while also, fully kind of handicapping the Mountain West, which I think there's some of that as well. Like if you only bring 2 over, Mountain West still pretty strong. By taking these top 4 brands, that puts them in a pretty tough spot. Andy wants to know, if the Pac gets to 8 members, do they get an auto bid? I don't think we know the answer to that as of yet. I would say that they have an inside track for that, 5th highest conference winner. Right now, the Mountain West is probably in the driver's seat for that. But moving forward, they definitely should still be in the mix, and it will be interesting to see like what status they're ultimately given, how that could possibly change. And I think some of that is still to be determined based on, what the SEC does, what the Big Ten does. I don't think either of those leagues are necessarily done. I think there's some discontentment amongst the top members of the ACC, and the Big 12 seems like they won't stop until they're a 40-team conference. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not really sure, and I think we're going to have to be flexible when it comes to how we frame all this, because we didn't even have the Power 5. Then the Power 5 was this term that we all commonly accepted. Then it went away just as quickly as it came in, and I think it's very possible that the Power 4, if you want to even call it that, it could be a very similar situation depending on what happens with some of these other leagues in the distant future. What goes into a school's academic value? Henry wants to know. A lot of that has to do with perception, appeasing donors outside of athletics. Like schools like Cal and Stanford, they want to be associated with with other big, highly respected universities. Like you want to be associated, and they were, with like Washington and UCLA. They don't want to be associated with Nevada, Reno. And really, like, it just kind of comes down to perception. And that's ultimately what's held Boise State back. If all it was can you field a competitive football team and have some regional support, Boise State would have been in the Big 12 or the Pac-12 15 years ago. They've had the success. They don't have the academics, and that's what held them back. That's why they weren't ever going to get into the original version of the Pac-12. But because we have had this chaos, because we have had so much movement, it's opened up an opportunity for schools like Boise, like CSU and San Diego State and Fresno, who, had been left behind basically in the last round of movement. And now have managed to attach themselves to a life raft and have an opportunity to pull themselves out. David wants to say, will there be equal revenue sharing? Some of these details to be determined, but I assume so. I got to go back and read through all this. This happened pretty quickly. But because you were bringing in these other schools and giving them full voting power, and basically, as full members, I don't understand why there wouldn't be equal revenue sharing. Although I guess Boise does have their sweetheart deal now. But they're not so much more valuable than these other programs where I think they get to, come in and swing their dick on the table. Excuse my language. I could have phrased that a little bit better, I guess. But, they can't come in and big dick us. They are no more relevant than any of these other schools are in 2024. And if they were, they would have been scooped up 15 years ago. They would have gone to the Big 12 even this last time, when Cincinnati and Central Florida and some of those other schools got poached. All of these schools that are going over have something to prove. If you're CSU, if you're Boise, if you're Fresno, if you're San Diego State, everybody's circumstance is different, but all of you have something to prove. And all of you have great potential with a league that has an opportunity to grow alongside you. So I think in the long run, there's great opportunity here for all these schools to elevate together, to raise each other's profile, to cement yourself as that premier West Coast league. Again, it may not ever be considered what the old Pac-12 was, but that's fine. Can you just be nationally relevant, and can you play a factor in this landscape? Be in the college football playoff, have teams represented, all that kind of stuff, because you probably weren't going to long-term in the old version of the Mountain West, especially if anybody had ended up leaving. And that's why it was so important to go with these other schools, because while it might not be leaps and bounds above where you're at from a status standpoint right now, it certainly has an opportunity to go much higher. So I'm just really excited to see where all this goes. Sean says, real question, can we now get baseball? I mean, there's Title IX stuff that goes into that anytime. You add a program, you've got to add multiple programs. I would say being in the Pac-12 probably increases the possibility of it. It will definitely be something I ask John Weber about today. I don't think he's going to be able to give me an answer on it today that's anything, definitive, but maybe it does open up the possibility of baseball being back on the table. Maybe that's part of the conversation behind the scenes too. There's so much still to be learned, and I do want that to be clear. I'm not acting like I know everything right now. A lot of this is still to be determined, but the fact that this happened so swiftly was really interesting. I mean, the reports start to come out late Wednesday night. By Thursday at 7 a.m., we're getting, confirmation and statements from the president and AD. It's been a whirlwind of a day, but it's a historic day. And frankly, it's a pretty historic week for CSU. Like, has an opportunity to potentially be one of the more memorable 7-day periods ever. I mean, Saturday was great. Ag Day was great. You had awesome attendance. You had the community together. You retire John Mosley's number and get to honor his legacy with his family in attendance. Torrey scores a touchdown, first touch, rocking the 14. First showdown in Fort Collins since 96 coming up. There was already so much energy around CSU. There was already so much excitement. And now, just to put a little cherry on top, conference realignment, the Rams are Pac-12 bound. It's a fun week. I'm really excited. I think the future is very much bright in Fort Collins. Definitely still have a big game to play on Saturday. I mean, if you can win this one, I can't even imagine how elated everybody in Fort Collins is going to be. They might be breaking out some 90s celebration, burning couches in the streets or something like that. But at this point, man, it just feels good to know that CSU, at least in some way, is going to factor into, the future of college football. And that's just what you want. You just want an opportunity. Like, I don't think many Ram fans are sitting here and being like, yep, we're joining the Pac-12, and by 2030, national champs, baby. Here we come. But you want, even if it's an illusion, you want an opportunity to compete. You want to have hope. I think that's what makes European soccer so intriguing, is that in theory, everyone at least has an opportunity. and you're giving yourself a seat at the table here, and you have an opportunity, and that's really all you can ask for. Now, the importance of capitalizing on this moment, I mean, it's significant, and I think this puts even more pressure, like on football and basketball, to have some success this year, because you don't want to go into a new conference, struggling. Like, you want to go in thriving, and I do think there's going to be some pressure to make sure that both these programs are in a good state. Now, you obviously just locked down Nico Medved to a big time contract extension. I don't think his seat's warm or anything like that, and I don't think this like drastically makes Jay Norvell's seat way hotter or anything like that. I mean, I think the expectations for this year remain the same. You got to get to a bowl game. You've got to win a game that matters, one of these trophy games. And you've got to find a way to still be playing relevant football come November, come December. But I mean, there definitely is going to be pressure to succeed. And we are seeing that Amy Parsons and John Weber are not going to be content with just standing pat, with just sitting around and saying good is good enough. They're going to keep striving to push the envelope, and we're going to keep taking chances. And, maybe some of these pan out, maybe some of them don't, but I'd sure as hell love to go down swinging instead of sitting here, and watching the world pass us by. Like, I love the boldness, and that's where I'm at right now. I'm excited, and I think this could be really good things for all our programs, all the Olympic sports. I think this is good for volleyball. I think that to be in a more top-heavy league, not have such a bottom. I think this is huge for softball. I'm just really excited. Henry wants to know, do you think this move will help us hold on to Medved? Look, guys, I think if Minnesota comes calling, that's his dream job. And I think the likelihood of him turning that down at any point, no matter what CSU is doing or where they are, pretty slim. I also don't think he's going to leave CSU for just any job, and he's already shown that. He turned down Oklahoma State this past offseason. He could have left. He didn't. He's still here. I think he's committed. He's got his family here. He's got his kids here. But I always think that there are certain jobs that are going to be pretty tough to outbid. And, when you factor in family and everything that goes into that, the conversation just gets a little bit more complicated. But I do think it helps. I think if you're in a league that has greater perception, it helps from a recruiting standpoint. It helps, from a retaining talent standpoint. And all of those factors are reasons why coaches are looking to jump ship these days. It's always been pretty tough to be a college coach. Now, when you have all these other extenuating circumstances, it's that much more challenging. If you can elevate your brand, it helps you. Again, like, I'm not saying all of a sudden you're national championship contenders, but it helps you remain relevant. Your ceiling in the long run is theoretically higher, and you're making sure that you're making moves instead of just sitting here with your hands in the air saying, what are you going to do? So I'm thrilled about this move. It's bittersweet in terms of what it could mean for the relationships that we've had with schools like Wyoming. Even, Utah State, New Mexico, we've been pretty deeply rooted with. Air Force less so, but again, that's me being petty. They have owned CSU. If CSU had more success in that series, I'd probably be pounding the table to keep that game on the line as well. But admittedly, it's never been one that's moved me the same way that Wyoming or CU has, even when the Rams were better in that series, like under Lubick. That's where I'm at. I will certainly talk about this more in the coming weeks as we learn more information. We'll get guests on. We'll talk about what this means for football, what this means for basketball. I'm excited. I'm really, really excited. Before we get out of here, Matt asked, do you think CSU should be vouching for Wyoming to also be included? I think that's complicated. I think that CSU would be willing to, give a lending hand. I don't know if they'd be adamant, because I think there is a harsh reality of what kind of market size Wyoming ultimately can be. They don't bring a ton from a TV dollar standpoint. And at the end of the day, that's what drives all this is TV markets and, what kind of money can they make? So, I don't know. But it is bittersweet for me, because the border war is my favorite rivalry in all of sports, not just college sports. It's my favorite rivalry in sports, period. I have a bronze boot. I'm staring at it on the other side of my room right now, life-size replica of it. I mean, it's a game that's deeply ingrained in me. It's my whole life, and I would be genuinely heartbroken if CSU and Wyoming didn't play every year. Now there may be 1 or 2 seasons where that just happens because they're not able to figure it out because you already got some games scheduled out, but I think there's an opportunity to make it happen if both schools are willing. And I think both schools should prioritize it because it's one of the more unique matchups in all sports, and it would just be a shame to lose it. And if Air Force and UNLV ended up in the mix as well down the line, that wouldn't be a bummer to me either. All right, that's all I've got for today. Shout out to everybody for rocking with me on this emergency live pod. I'm losing my voice. I got to get some water here, prepare for some big interviews. I'm going to catch up with John Weber. I'll be going live tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll also be going live Saturday night, post game, roughly around 10-ish p.m., maybe a little earlier, maybe a little bit later. That is all dependent on how long post game ends up taking. I can't wait. A big weekend in Fort Collins just got even bigger. Primetime game on CBS. Now, they're going to be talking about CSU moving to the Pac-12 throughout the broadcast. I imagine some of that was strategically involved with the timing of this news. But I'm always proud to be y'all. The future is very, very bright in Fort Collins. Go Rams. Beat CU. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.